Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Thursday morning. We wanted to come to you this morning and just give you a brief update on some curriculum mandates and changes that are going to be coming down the pike. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anne Marie Lawrence, and I am the Director of Curriculum and Workshop Delivery here at Inspired Instruction. It's part of my job is to stay current on the changes that are coming down from the state. And so we'll get started to share some of those things with you this morning. Before we begin, I do want to mention a few things for you to be aware of. We do have a resource document that we will provide to you via email as a follow-up to the webinar this morning. I will mention throughout the course of our time this morning some of the resources that you'll find in that document. So please be on the lookout for that in your email in the next couple of days. With the resource document in your email, you will also receive access to the recording of today's webinar. So in case you missed it, or if there's anything that you want to go back and revisit, you'll be able to do so via the recording. And then finally, I do want to mention to you that we do have the Q&A feature available. My colleague, Dr. Jacqueline Ciano, is joining us this morning. She'll be running the Q&A feature. So if you have questions as we move through our time, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer any questions that we're able to at the time. If there's anything that we can't answer for you this morning, we'll certainly get back to you once we have that information. So let's go ahead and get started. So to frame our session this morning, a couple of topics that we're going to focus on. First, we're going to take a look at any key shifts. So what is changing? And we're going to provide a brief summary of what those changes are. We'll also be taking a look at any implications of these changes. So how is this going to impact curriculum? And we'll just close up this morning by sharing some thoughts around how you can begin to align to these changes. So first of all, the question is, what is changing? So the first change you may or may not be aware of is cursive handwriting is back. So former Governor Murphy signed into law to mandate that public schools must provide instruction for cursive in grades 3 through 5. And this is beginning in the 2026-2027 school year. So this came as an announcement in a broadcast memo from February 11th. And that memo can be found on the broadcast page of the DOE website. In the resource document that I mentioned just a few moments ago, we have provided you the link directly to that broadcast page. So that way you can continue to check it for additional broadcasts that may be coming, but also to take a closer look at this particular broadcast. It does state that curriculum shall include activities and instructional materials that help students become proficient in both reading and legibly writing cursive by the end of grade 5. And the broadcast does also share some suggestions for curriculum. So we'll take a quick look at that here so that I can show you what those recommendations are. So some considerations for curriculum you'll see in the center of your screen here. And these are some things that you want to take into account when you're incorporating cursive handwriting instruction into your curriculum. So again, it'll be important for you to take a look at that broadcast memo and be able to see those recommendations up closer. Another change is that we do have some revisions to some of the New Jersey student learning standards. And we will go through some key shifts that apply to all of these NJSLS standards, and we'll also take a closer look at individual areas and provide a summary of those changes. So first, here's your list of standards that have been revised. The science standards have been revised. There's also been revision to the world languages standards, the visual and performing arts standards, the career readiness, life literacies, and key skills standards, the computer science, innovation and society standards, and the preschool teaching and learning standards. A few things to note here before we move into the key shifts. The computer science, innovation, and society standards have been renamed. These standards were previously titled Computer Science and Design Thinking, but now they're being referred to as Computer Science, Innovation, and Society. The last thing I want to note here before we move into some key shifts is about the preschool teaching and learning standards. The preschool teaching and learning standards have undergone more significant revisions than these other content areas. So today we're going to focus on just the brief summaries of the other content areas, but we will be offering a follow-up session dedicated to the preschool standards at a later date. So you'll want to be on the lookout for information about that. As part of your resource document, we have included links to the unofficial standard documents for all of these content areas. So what are some key shifts? There are some key shifts that apply to all of the content area standards that have undergone revision. So we'll take a look at those first before getting into a deeper dive of summary of changes to each of the content areas individually. So one thing here is a priority focus has been providing developmental progressions. So the disciplinary concepts that are presented are going to come with a K-12 learning progression. This is important because it helps educators to see how the knowledge and skills build over time. So this is going to allow for more intentional and coherent curriculum design. And the vertical alignment will really support scaffolding so that we can ensure that instruction is not only developmentally appropriate, but that students are also prepared for increasingly sophisticated tasks. So it will be something that you'll see across all of these content areas. Additionally, the DOE is offering guidance documents for the standards, and you're likely aware of the Standards Transparency and Mastery Platform page that is part of the DOE website. When you access the STAMP page, you will find that for each content area, there are documents that support districts as they are developing their curriculum. So, New Jersey educators will be included in the development of resources and will work in collaboration with the department. So that's important to note. And the outcome of this will include the delivery of these guidance documents. It will also include professional learning opportunities and other supporting resources to help with developing curriculum and developing instruction of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. Another key shift that crosses all of these content areas is the notation of climate change. So this symbol of climate change is familiar from the revised ELA and math standards that we've seen. So this has been added into these content areas as well. So your climate change symbol will appear with performance expectations to notate that those performance expectations will provide opportunity to incorporate climate change. In terms of implementation of the revised standards, there was a resolution to adopt from December 3rd. And what it states is that the revised science standards must be implemented this coming September 2026. And all of the other revised standards are slated to be implemented in September of 2027. So you'll have that time to update those standards that have undergone deeper revisions. Once the standards have been officially adopted, the state will release a broadcast regarding these timelines. At this stage, that broadcast has not yet been released, but once again, in your resource document, we have linked the broadcast page for you. So keep an eye on that so that when that broadcast is released, you'll be able to access that. So we'll take a closer look at just a brief overview, just a quick summary of some of the changes that you'll find across these content areas. We'll begin with science, and as I just mentioned a moment ago, the expectation is that the revised science standards will be implemented this coming September 2026. So the good news about the science standards is there really have been minimal revisions overall. The performance expectations are largely unchanged. The most notable change when you take a look at this document is in the structure of the document. So including those previously mentioned shifts that apply across all of the impacted content areas, the developmental progressions, the climate change, and additional supporting resources. So the one thing I do want to mention is that the unofficial science standards document that has been released does not include the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, or the cross-cutting concepts. If you remember, the previous documents contain these practices in a grid form. So we have reached out to inquire about alignment of these practices with the implementation of the revised standards. We have not received a response yet, so that will be something that we will continue to update as the information is presented for us. Moving into world languages. Again, world languages will be slated for implementation effective September of 2027. For a quick summary of the changes here, one of the notable changes is the integration of related topics across modes of communication. And so what that looks like, one thing to mention is that all of these content area standards, the revisions were recommended by an expert review committee. So the standards were really looked over and really thought about how they can be improved. And of course, without large shifts that will impact instruction negatively. So the integration of the related topics across the modes of communication, the committee really focused on being more clear about intercultural competence and as well as integration of intercultural statements. There's a deeper connection between language and culture. And there's also attention to social and cultural factors so that there is a greater emphasis on application to real life scenarios. The world language standards also have been reorganized in terms of the performance expectations and the nomenclature. So there's more alignment with inclusive current terminology. It has a more consistent and user-friendly structure. There's embedded focus on culture and literacy. There's been reorganization into strands, and there's additional support for instructional planning. Finally, one of the most notable changes in the world languages standards is the application of performance expectations to any context. So the performance expectations have been written to be usable in a wide range of settings and situations. The terminology has been expanded to allow for greater versatility in how standards are applied. And this enables educators to apply expectations in varied cultural, academic, and real-world contexts. So a lot of thought into real-world context and application in real-life scenarios for students. Moving into the visual and performing arts standards, again, falling under implementation in September of 2027. Some of the key changes here, reduction and consolidation of performance expectations. So the previous standards have been streamlined to better develop foundational elements of this content area. Standards were consolidated to focus on core content, enhance vertical alignment, as we mentioned previously, and to make learning targets more clear for both educators and students. Performance expectations have been realigned. The performance expectation language has been refined where needed in order to promote more consistency and alignment with the anchor standards. And this revision establishes a well-structured progression to sequential learning. And again, that goes back to those developmental progressions as well. So an emphasis on really progressing student learning in a sensible sequential order. Learning expectations are more closely aligned with students' developmental readiness, and the updates to these standards have aimed to ensure that all students engage with key concepts at stages where they can meaningfully understand and apply them. There is revised alphanumeric coding for the music ensembles and harmonizing instrument standards. grade levels have been removed, and the purpose for that was to allow flexibility to implement the varying proficiency levels at earlier grade levels. Finally, there's clarification of performance expectations language. And the goal of that was to improve clarity for ease of implementation of the learning targets. Career readiness, life literacies, and key skills have also undergone some revisions, effective for implementation September of 2027. And like the visual and performing arts standards, there has been a reduction and consolidation of the performance expectations. So again, a streamline to better develop foundational elements of the content area. And again, just to repeat, the importance of the vertical alignment. So standards here were also consolidated to focus on the core content. So we are enhancing that vertical alignment and making the learning targets more clear. There is a focus on foundational learning targets here, and that's an improvement in the progression from foundational knowledge to more advanced and abstract topics. Some of the more complex concepts were moved to higher grade levels, and some of the early grade expectations were simplified to lead to mastery at foundational levels. Again, we're seeing here reorganization of domains and some change to nomenclature. So alignment between standards and current terminology was a focus here with these revisions, as well as a clearer organizational logic. And again, that is to make for ease of document use. Some of the domains have been renamed and reordered as well. There's a greater focus on career readiness and navigation. So priority has been placed on skills and knowledge that directly support post-secondary and workforce readiness. Career-related standards now better emphasize practical skills. There has been alignment with legislation from 2022 that mandates information literacy education. So all public schools in grades K to 12 need to provide information literacy education. And a committee did convene in the summer of 2024 to draft information literacy education standards. And those standards have been integrated with the career readiness NJSLS. Couple of additional changes here with these particular standards. So reimagination of the standard 9.3, which is the career and technical education standard. So the CTE standard 9.3 was previously built around the National Career Clusters Framework. And this framework has been transformed, including sector profiles, industry sector profiles, replacing the existing standards and performance expectations. So the committee identified opportunities to improve access to these skills outside of approved CTE programs. So these concepts have been reworked and have been folded into standard 9.1. So the key here that I would like you to take away is that opportunity to improve access to the skills outside of those approved CTE programs. So we're seeing it more broadly. And then one other thing to note here is that previously we had educational technology standards embedded across multiple disciplines in the career readiness, life literacies, and key skill standards. But those educational technology standards have been returned to Standard 8. And speaking of Standard 8, we'll move into the Computer Science, Innovation, and Society standards, again for implementation effective September 2027. Just a reminder here of the renaming of these standards. Previously, they were referred to as Computer Science and Design Thinking. And now we're referring to them as Computer Science, Innovation, and Society. Some of the changes here, most notably alignment with national standards. So these standards have been updated to ensure alignment with new research and widely accepted national frameworks. For example, the Computer Science Teachers Association framework and the International Society of Technology in Education framework. Standard 8.3 digital literacy has been refined and elevated. So revisions realign educational technology with computer science and engineering design. So that goes back to what I previously mentioned as it connects to the career readiness standards. And this underscores the importance of digital literacy as a foundational component of student success in other academic domains, not just in the domain of computer science. There's also reorganization of domains and nomenclature, as we've seen in several of the areas. So updates here include remaining disciplinary concepts to reflect terminology widely used in these fields, and a streamlining of the performance expectations. So again, we're seeing a consolidation of standards here to allow for ease of use and scaffolding of skills. Few more changes here to these computer science standards. One thing that's notable here is a shift to modernization and relevance. So standards will now incorporate adaptable language that accommodates future innovations. As we know, technology is consistently changing, and so that's going to be reflected here in these standards. The standards ensure students engage with tools and concepts that mirror real-world applications. Changes also emphasize critical thinking, ethical reflection, collaborative design, and adaptability. The new standards will also incorporate artificial intelligence with the increased prominence of AI. The revised standards have thoughtfully embedded AI science and literacy in the revised performance expectations. The final change to note here is the design for unplugged and flexible access in grades K through 2. So the revised standards are designed to acknowledge the varied technology use and developmental needs among younger students. So the standards allow for diverse ways for students to access and demonstrate knowledge. So again, this is just a brief overview of changes to these standards. Once you are able to access the documents, you'll be able to see firsthand what the standards actually look like. But we just wanted to provide just a brief summary of some of the changes that you can expect to see. So what does this mean for curriculum? What are the implications here, and how do these changes impact the district curricula? So in the content areas, individual content area standards must be reflected in your curriculum documents. All grade level specific standards must be taught within the academic year, and grade banded standards must all be taught by the end of the band. This is nothing new. These are curriculum requirements. They will remain curriculum requirements, but with revised standards, these will be things that you want to recall and ensure that you have completed your curriculum documents to reflect all of the revised standards in this manner. There are required inclusions, as we know, in our curriculum documents. And so one to call out here with these revised standards would be that there needs to be evidence of grade level appropriate career readiness, life literacies, and key skill standards, as well as the computer science, innovation, and society standards. And that evidence needs to be integrated throughout your curriculum documents. So where to begin? Our recommendation at this stage would be first to begin to access the unofficial documents through your resource sheet. You will be able to see the standards and the new layout of the documents, including those developmental progressions and information about supporting documents through those unofficial standards documents. Begin to cross-check changes. We have reached out to the state to inquire about cross-check documents and whether they will be provided. If you recall, with revisions to previous content area standards, the state did provide what they were calling a crosswalk So we have inquired about those crosswalk documents. As of this morning, we have not heard back about that yet, but we'll certainly inform as we get that information and anything else that may be helpful to you. We also recommend at this point to continue checking the broadcast link for confirmed adoption of these revised standards. Again, we have linked the page for broadcasts to your resource document. So once you receive that resource document via email, you will have that broadcast link at hand so that you can access it quickly and frequently to stay updated on any broadcasts that are sent out from the state. I do want to reiterate that we will be in contact regarding a more comprehensive webinar on the preschool teaching and learning standards. As I mentioned at the beginning of our time this morning, they have undergone more significant changes than the other content standards that we have looked at this morning. The preschool teaching and learning standards, again, will be mandated for implementation as it stands now. They're slated for implementation September of 2027. So there is some time to become familiar with the changes in those standards. But please be on the lookout for information regarding another time for us to share a more comprehensive look at those changes. Here's just a quick look at the resource sheet that will be made available to you as a follow-up to today's time in your email. As I previously mentioned, we have linked in all of the unofficial standard documents that have undergone revisions. We've also linked in the resolution to adopt the standards. That is where you will note dates that are slated for implementation of these different content areas. Once again, we have linked in the page for broadcast so that you can stay current on those announcements coming from the state. And finally, we have linked in the STAMP page, the Standards, Transparency, and Mastery Platform page, where those supporting resources will be housed to help districts in their turnover of implementation and instruction of these new standards. As always, we here at Inspired Instruction are happy to help you. Some ways that we can support you: we are able to provide professional development on understanding and unpacking these standards, as well as aligning them to instruction and to instructional practices. We do offer a series of curriculum services. We audit, we revise, we write. We can incorporate pacing guides, and we're happy to support your work as your district adopts these new standards and begins to implement them into your instruction. I want to thank you again for joining us this morning for this just brief outline of what you can expect to see coming your way. If you would like to reach out to myself or one of our team members to discuss anything further or discuss other ways that we can support you, you can reach us through any of the modes of communication you see on your screen. We can be reached via email, phone. You can go to our website and make a call request, and someone on our team will reach out to you. Again, you will receive a recording of this webinar in an email as a follow-up. So if there's anything that you missed or anything you'd like to revisit, you'll be able to access that recording. I'm going to ask if you don't mind to take a moment to complete our webinar survey. That link has been placed in the chat for you. We really appreciate your feedback. We're always looking for ways that we can improve and bring you the information that you find most helpful. So that feedback is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to being able to speak with you or share additional information with you in the future. Have a wonderful day.